And loosen them both up one full turn. You want this to be parallel with your steering wheel, because you want the tip of the forcing screw to perfectly match the tip or the center of the steering column or the steering shaft. That's why that point on this thing is helpful if you've got it. This takes a while. Get my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to kind of eyeball this, make sure I'm centered up with the shaft of the steering column. And I get that as tight as I can by hand. But I don't use any actual tools on the forcing screw because I don't want to damage the shaft of the steering column. And I'm going to take a big puff of smoke, so there's probably going to be a big cloud that comes by there. Don't start smoking, kids. It's expensive and bad for you. Okay, have my forcing screw tightened up by hand. I had these two side screws tightened up by hand and then backed off one full turn. Now I'm just going to start tightening one of these screws. Kind of keep an eye on the forcing screw, make sure that it's centered up with the shaft of the steering column. And what this does is it's applying kind of sideways pressure, and it's going to be pulling this side of the steering wheel up instead of pulling the steering wheel up all balanced. It's kind of cocking it sideways, and that little trick makes it so much easier to take this steering wheel off. That easy. And I'm sure some of you that have done this by trying to use the forcing screw, you've used an impact wrench, you've used a breakover bar, you've used giant amounts of torque on that forcing screw to pull that steering wheel off, and it deforms and mushrooms out the center shaft of the steering column. You use this old guy trick, I guarantee you, you won't ever go back. Old guys are smart. You don't get old by being stupid. Next we have to take off, you know, I normally don't ever put this thing back on. It's just something to be pretty and help keep dust out. Put it back on if you want. There's 3 tabs. 2 of them have slits in them for you to get your screwdriver into, and the other one is solid. Do the ones that have the slit first, then you can take the 3rd one off. Alright, that one doesn't want to come off. Now do the 3rd one that doesn't have the slit in it. Here's our lock plate. It's still pointing pretty good. See this big tube? This big tube on the lock plate depressor? There's a reason this thing is the same size as the grooves on your steering column, and I'll show you that in a second. I don't want to move the camera because I've just barely got it tilted where I want it to be. So I will show you that at a different point, but I'm going to point that out to you. This right there is the horn pin, the spring-loaded horn pin goes in that plastic sleeve right there. Screw the center shaft down. Screw that center. God, I don't even know what to call it, man. Screw it down onto the shaft. You want the edges of that big tube to be totally flush with the splined parts of the steering shaft. Tight spot there. I'm alright, I'm going to pause it because I need to move the camera because I want you all to see this. Okay, and we're back. Alright, this column threads onto the shaft. This sleeve screws onto the center shaft of the steering column. And you want it to butt up against this section that's got grooves cut in it for splines for the steering wheel to go on in the correct position. There's a snap ring down here that you'll be able to see it better once the lock plate has been depressed. So here in a second I'm going to turn this nut, tighten this nut down, and it's going to depress this big round plate with the notches cut out in it, because this little post right here pops up to lock the steering column. When you stick your ignition key in and turn the lock, this post sucks down and you can turn the steering wheel freely. Then when you take your key out, that post sticks up and waits for the steering column, or waits for the steering wheel to be turned enough for it to line up with one of these grooves, and then it pops into place. So I'm going to turn this nut. Hold on. Alright. I'm going to turn this nut with my left hand, no less. Alright, now you can see that this snap ring is a little bit more exposed. There is no way in hell I'm going to be able to do this with my left hand. One-handed to begin with, and then with my left hand is not even an option. So I'm going to have to set the camera back down for me to get the snap ring off. But then we're going to be right back. See where the snap ring is. Here in a sec. When we come back, I'm going to pop the snap ring out of its place, and I'm going to slide it up this portion of the steering shaft. It's got the grooves in it. See this groove? There's grooves all the way around the steering shaft. I'm going to slide this snap ring up. I'm going to pop it out of its groove, slide it all the way up, and I'm going to slide it onto this column that is part of the lock depressor. And we'll be right back. Okay, I've decided to go ahead and let you watch me try to fight this thing. I normally rotate the snap ring around until